community leaders in the immigrant community to hear from them and talk to them about what's going on, what their needs are. Similarly, I don't think a lot of us, and we have been doing this work for the last 6 or 7 years, that's all I've been doing it, maybe you longer. I was out at the research park, and there are businesses out there who are having a forum of their own on March 30th about the impact of the immigration laws on these high-tech firms that are in Champaign-Urbana. They're concerned about it. It's a major concern for them.
Yeah.
We're over here banging our heads on trying to get stuff done, and these guys have the legitimate resources and the self-interest to help solve this problem. They just haven't been at the table, and they haven't had a chance to say, hey, we can help with that part. So I think for us, it's trying to take advantage of the moment. I mean, clearly this is all coming out of the fact that this is an issue not only in our country and our community, but in the world. And we're trying to take advantage of that opportunity where people are hungry to do something about it. And unfortunately, our president is motivating people to really want to do something about it, because I think people are scared about the direction he wants to see the country go. But now we have to build that infrastructure to be able to handle those kinds of commitments and resources and connect people in ways that we just haven't had the opportunity for. So we're, as the University Y, if we hadn't gotten the call from our national, I don't know that we would have had the resources to sort of take these step forwards. But in their support for this kind of work, we're able to sort of step in to fill that void.
Well, it seems, in a way, when you describe it, that's exactly what Immigration Forum tried to be in the beginning. Or maybe not quite with that much focus and clarity, but just this idea of, like, let's get people together and then we can sort of mutually figure things out. What we found was the people that we could get together were not the people who had the levers of power, but people who were interested. So we had a bunch of interested people who were doing things in their own limited personal way. And one reason I think we've sort of veered as a group towards more service providing was it was just something we could do, you know, because we could talk about what ought to be done, but we had nobody who had the ability to do it, you know, in the group. So what you're talking about is like, all right, I'm going to use the power of the Y, the international power of this organization, the prestige of the name, you know, to pull in these bigger names and these people who can do things and force them to think about it. Not force, but, you know.
So here's the thing is, I think the Y provides legitimacy to the effort, but I don't think people are coming to the table because the Y's asked them only. So I think, you know, the dynamic of what's going on in our country economically makes business want to be at the table. We've got low unemployment rates. They're looking for workers, whether that's high tech or low wage. They want those workers and employees, and they need them. So there's a need there. That's why they're coming to the table. It's not so much that we ask, but it's like, we have this as a problem for us, or they're worried about what Trump's going to do. I think similarly with the faith community, they've cared about it. When we were doing stuff a few years ago around secure communities, a handful of churches stepped forward. But I think as this is heightened and they see their role as sort of serving those strangers in their communities, that they are coming to the table. And I think for elected officials, you know, when you have 500 people in Champaign-Urbana show up at an airport protest in a matter of 12 hours, there's clearly a strongly felt feeling in the community. And those politicians are reading that, and they're seeing it. So when I go around and talk and invite elected officials to be part of this, they know this is the place to be in our community. They know that people feel that strong. I don't know if 3 years ago, if I would have invited them, they might say, well, that sounds interesting, but I'm a little bit busy. So I think the Y adds credibility and legitimacy to it. I think the players are coming to the table because they have a self-interest in it, which they didn't always have. And I think, again, it's that synergy and capturing that moment. I also attribute the work that's been going on that, you know, when the CU Immigration Forum got together, it was the same concept. Well, let's get together and talk and see what's going on and how we meet the needs. As you said, it was at the grassroots level, and it didn't really bring the institutions that really, you know, influence the decisions that affect our lives on a daily basis weren't at the table with us. But I think it's the work of the last 6 years that has given CU Immigration Forum and the University Y and ESERMAC some credibility, is the work that's gone on for years. These elected officials, these community leaders recognize, you know, they've seen CU Immigration Forum out there and doing this stuff, so that work had to precede, I think, to get where we are now. So to me, it all sort of very organic and generic, and so our role is to just nurture it.
Yeah, so it's been growing all this time. Yeah, I don't mean to make it seem like two entirely separate and unconnected, disconnected things, but I just listening to your description, I was like, yeah, okay, that's kind of what we said we were going to try
It's very
to do.
similar, yes.
But it didn't work for us.
Well, so
And
all I'm saying is it worked. It's just now it's at the next
Yeah,
level.
it's been working, but in a very slow kind of
Right.
incremental way. So you said you're the second group to do this. That means somebody else has done it before.
Right.
How's that worked in the places where they've done it? Do you have like actual hard information?
They do, and I couldn't give you one of the numbers. So I know it was an increase of thousands of people served and stuff like that. But I think the key thing has really been this idea of not just thinking about serving people, but looking at the community and how do we engage the community in a different way from how we've done it in the past. So that's one of the strongest lessons from WISE in the 6 cities where they've already done this. You know, you have places like Houston that since the 1970s, they brought us all together back in January, sort of an orientation for the 6 new cities, and I'm sitting next to a guy from Houston, and he has a 99 employees and a $13 million budget for the work that they're doing. And so as I said to him, our whole organization is 10 employees, and that includes our part-time janitors. So we're a much smaller scale in terms of that. So there's a long history of groups who've been doing this for a while, which is a great resource for us to be able to tap into that. So as we're doing stuff for the first time, we have those kinds of people who have been through the ringer and sort of know the lay of the land.
So the model has been being crafted through
Right.
it. So the first group, it's not like you're redoing what they already did in a different place. They sort of trial and error, and they came up with this sort of idea like, here, you know what we should be doing is like this. And they said, okay, our next group, you're going to start doing that now, and our next group's going to start at that point.
So, and we have a framework that's provided that has these 5 pathways to to immigrant integration. So there are some very specific ways of thinking about how to look at the world out there and services and needs and community. But part of what they're trying to do in the rollout is pick different types of communities. So we're the smallest community of the 12 that'll be out there. But we're also, along with Columbus now, 2 university communities, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, where University of Minnesota is. So there's 3 communities that have Big Ten schools in it. So we're going to be sharing, what works on the university campus. So although this isn't aimed at international students at all, it's really aimed at people who come, newcomers and immigrants to our community. But international students bring spouses and children, and they're faced with coming into a community where they aren't familiar with the culture, the language in many cases. And so what can we as a community make them feel welcome and feel part of the community and be able to participate in it fully? So what is true in a university community might be very different than what it might be like in a place like Boston, a larger urban area, or Houston, and stuff like that. So I think they're looking at sort of experimenting and piloting in different types of community, different sizes of community, and see what works, so that the next sets of WISE that begin doing this can learn from what we've all done and craft it a little bit differently in each community.
Yeah. Well, it seems like we've already found here in town that there's some very distinctive and often not at all overlapping immigrant groups, not groups, but communities, I guess you could say, with very different needs. Like you identified one a minute ago of the high-tech industry. You have a lot of people coming here like, I'm an engineer, I'm a doctor, I'm looking for these kinds of things. You know, I have money with me when I come. I have, you know, a whole kind of support system, but I am looking for assistance dealing with bureaucracy maybe and red tape and I don't know, visa issues or whatever problems you have, you know, working in your industry. Then you have students, they're begging students to come here, like, come give us your money, you know, anywhere in the world, just come here with your money and we will teach you world-class education. So you've got students from all over the world coming here. They have very distinct needs. It's kind of similar to this high-tech group, but they have a support system financially from parents and whatnot, but they don't really have the same visa issues. With them, it's more just like, how do I, you know, negotiate simple things. Like I've got money from my country coming here. I have to do banking. I have weird banking stuff, like what's going on with that and laws and whatnot. And then you have the sort of the lower tech, if I can call them that, low wage, you know, people just like, I'm fleeing violence or I'm coming here because there's no work in my country. I can get a job, but it's a whole different set of issues. And we found, like, I know when we do Quad Day, it's always an interesting thing for me because it's like, oh, immigration reform, what is that? And so I try to describe what it is, and they're like, well, do you help with blah, blah, blah? I've never even heard of this thing, and it's something to do with some, visa kind of
program, yeah.
Student whatever. And I'm thinking that maybe once I graduate, I'm going to want to try to get a job. And what do I, and I'm like, we don't really do much with that, because I don't even know who to tell you to talk to about that. Right. The university should have a program, because you have very distinct needs that really this group and this group does not deal with. It's very unique to you. So it's like one thing I rail about regularly on this show is the tendency to just lump immigration. It's just a single issue. Right. It's a single kind of person, and we think about them a single way, and what are their needs, and it's all over the place. And that includes, quote unquote, illegal, undocumented immigrants. Right. Are everybody from the couple that had a backpack that came, rode the train all the way from Guatemala, and then swam the Rio Grande and marched across the desert, and just somehow ended up here, to someone who came to study and like, well, I got a job and I kind of like to stay here. Or I got a girlfriend and I want to kind of
overstay their visa.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different. These people have almost nothing in common except they have some technical problem with the government, and yet our current administration is treating pretty much all of them the same way. Yeah. As nope.
Well, and the other thing is, so Champaign County has the largest foreign-born population, so immigrants, in the state outside of the Chicago area.
Wow.
We have
okay.
Almost 26,000 foreign-born residents, not excluding the students who come here.
Oh.
What people don't realize is 46% of those people are citizens of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, and a third of them, around 32%, are legal permanent residents here. So when you put those two together, it's only, I think, 22% are undocumented. But when people think about immigrants, they think they're all undocumented. And in fact, in our community, almost half are citizens of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the dynamic is how we view people, though. And I think, although there are lots of different needs on one level, the other thing that is somewhat uniting now is that the hate, unfortunately, that is being spewed by the administration that encourages, like the killing in Kansas the other day.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that there are immigrants who are here, who are professors or doctors and full citizens. They're afraid because people look at them and see whatever they are being fed, that's what everyone is who's not white.
Right.
And so there's a fear there. And so what does our community also do about that? So it isn't just about services for the people who are students or people who need jobs or people who need high-tech visas, whatever it might be. It's also just about how do we view one another as people in our community. And that's also important work that needs to be going on, which isn't necessarily services, but it's something that I think our community needs to be thinking about, and how do we begin to address that? And so I think there are things that can begin to break down those kinds of things, community bridge building things, where we're encouraging people to interact and talk to each other. Again, I think our community's pretty good, but I've talked to people who are just very anxious, and so how do we send signals that are the opposite of the kind of stuff that they're picking up right now? How do we counter some of the hateful stuff that seems to be going on? And I think that's another important part of this whole thing.
Yeah, well, a perfect metaphor coming from the administration is the travel ban and the wall. So I think a lot of people heard about the wall during the run-up to the election, and they were like, well, but I kind of understand that because, these poor people are coming here and they're taking our jobs or social services or whatever they imagine. So they kind of got the wall. They didn't think of it as so much of a racist or a bigoted thing because it was, well, there's a reason for this. These people are just pouring. We have to stop them, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. But when the travel ban came out for that first time, that was just like across the board. There was no nuance to it at all. It was like, I don't care who you are. If you're from over there,
right, you're not welcome.
You're not welcome here. So you had doctors, you had physicists, you had whatever, poets, artists, all these people coming here and like, nope, sorry, you can't come in. We don't want you. And so definitely, if I were a professional here, and I saw that playing out in real time, I would be like, oh, whoa, these people are really serious. They don't want me here. Yeah. They don't want us here. What else? What other message could you possibly get from that?
Right.
They can explain it any way they want, but the message is pretty clear.
Right.
You're from somewhere else.
And the message is being received by them as immigrants, and it's being received by other people in our country as sort of a blessing to treat people that way, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a unfortunate kind of unleashing of that, and I do think the unleashing of hate is just one of the most atrocious things that's happened in the last 3 months. Just this sense that, I had this terrible experience. It was a day or two after the election. I was walking out of the grocery store, and as I was walking out, there's that space where cars are driving by the front of the store before you can get to the parking lot. Mm-hmm. And I went to step out, and there was a car coming, and it was an Asian man who was driving, and my eyes sort of met, and then we sort of both looked away. But what went through my head is I thought, oh, does he think I'm mad at him? Does he think I hate him? Does he think I'm looking at him in a certain way that wasn't? And is he thinking, oh, is he? I don't know. It sort of undermines the sense of humanity that we're all together, and not that I was thinking that or that he's thinking of it, but it made me question how people think, because I'm a white guy. So what do they think?
Yeah.
Do we all hate them? I don't feel that way, but God, I want to somehow change that dynamic.
Yeah. How can
I don't know. It's terrible what it sort of unleashes. I just keep thinking it's this unleashing thing that sort of grows itself.
Yeah, it does. It feeds on itself.
It does.
Because let's face it, anger, hate, those things are empowering. They feel empowering. Mm-hmm. I don't know that they actually are empowering. In fact, I would argue that they aren't in a deeper sense of things. But it feels. I'm sure you've been mad and you're like, and you just kick something. It's like it's a release. It's just this sense of like, I did something about that. I was mad and I kicked that. And, I just broke this thing. I shouldn't have kicked it. I don't know why I did that. But for a second there, it feels really good. Yeah. And so I can see how a lot of people who've just been frustrated and are unhappy or whatever for a long time can feel empowered and unleashed, as you're saying. They're just like, I'm free now to
behave.
Let this all out. I can finally, because they never had a target for their unhappiness. And that's the problem, is I think very few of us really understand where our actual unhappiness comes from. So we just look look outside. It's very hard to look in the mirror and go, I'm unhappy because I sell myself short. I have high expectations and low energy. I don't fulfill my own dreams. I disappoint myself all the time. I'm not as honest as I like to be. Whatever that your list is, that's probably where most of your unhappiness comes from. But it's so much easier to go, well, this guy is, he's, he always, every time we have a meeting, he's always like looking at me like, come on, we're going to get going. He's hurrying me along, and that person over there is, it's so much easier to blame other people for our problems. So I wonder, how is your welcoming center, how those less distinctive things, are you just hoping that those are dealt with by dealing with the other more basic, objective things? Are the subjective things going to just be taken care of, or
no? I think you still need to do that work, and so part of it, I think, is really people interacting with one another. It's a lot harder to have these kinds of views and dislikes of people when you interact with them, right?
When you actually know.
Yeah. So I do think, and I think, in the faith communities really have an opportunity to play a big role in this. One of the things that's just amazed me in the last couple of months is the outpouring of concern and desire to do something among a broad range of faith communities that normally don't often find themselves on the same page. And so I do think they want to play some role. So I was talking to a conservative evangelical minister in town who said that his congregation really wants to be involved in this, and they really believe in working with the stranger and welcoming them to the community. But I think one of the things that has to happen is that, he talked about whether it's, the idea of adopting a family or that two families are connecting with one another. Let's have a long-standing resident and an immigrant family, get together once a month or do that. Or whether it's, on a much more social level, one of the things Welcome America really tries to encourage is where people are connecting and interacting with one another. So how do we create those opportunities in our community for people to have those experiences? I think that goes a long way to it. The longer and the more we're disconnected with another, the more we're in our own bubble, the more we can talk about who people are without ever interacting with them. And I think that's part of the problem right now is how do we break down some of those barriers? And I do think that faith communities can play an important role. So not all of this is job training and visas and that sort of stuff. Those are important issues and challenges that we face as a society, but I do think how we interact with each other as human beings is important. And so I do think that kind of work is also needs to be part of this. And again, I don't really have the answers, but I think once you get smart people together who are concerned about these things, talking about them, there's all kinds of creativity and interesting ways to do stuff. And I think what we want to do is create that laboratory, the place where some experimentation can take place, and encourage people to come together. Again, I think the will is there in a way that it really hasn't been before, and I think the opportunity is ripe to do something about it. So we're excited.
So what do you need? You've obviously you're going out and talking to people, and you're enlisting them to the good cause of showing up to these meetings a couple times. But what do you need from us, the community? What do you need us? What can we do, or what kind of part can we play in your program?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the challenges that those of us who care about immigration right now is it's sort of a blessing, but so many people want to be part of stuff, and we haven't figured out how they can best plug into it. So I do think it's going to take, whether it's a few weeks or a few months, for both the infrastructure to handle volunteers, here's the kind of things we want to do, as well as the time to think through, well, what are some of the needs? What are some of the areas that we as a community can come together with some solutions? And that's just going to take a little bit of time. But I'm guessing in the next 6 months, we'll start seeing opportunities for people to do stuff. A crazy idea is someone has this idea that what we ought to do is have a tour of the community, sort of a docent of, you go into a museum and someone walks you through and shows you all the paintings. Well, why not have those? So every Friday, go to the Champaign City building and you can, for free, just go around and see where, I don't know if it's the grocery stores or if it's where the credit stores or the banking institutions or various, but somehow give people opportunities to very easily connect and get around the community and to connect with stuff like that. It could be weird stuff like that. So what do we need? We need a driver. We need someone who will do this or that. So I think there'll be lots of opportunities. It's just going to take a little bit to go from the planning stage to the implementation stage. So I would encourage people to stay tuned. What I've said to church communities, because I've spoken to several churches lately, there's 30 volunteers. What do we do tomorrow? And what I've asked them is to think about, if you're within an organization, is talk about what are the assets that you have as an organization. What can you do? Who speaks different languages? If you're a congregation, can you just survey your congregants and say, who speaks French, who speaks Spanish, who speaks these various languages, so that if the time comes that we need people helping with language or translation, that we can tap into that church and they say, oh, here's the 3 French speakers. What do you need for that? Who can provide transportation? We have people who have various challenges to get up to Chicago. We have some unaccompanied minors who need rides up there. So sort of do an inventory asset within your own group or your own community. There's a small group, it's amazing. I got a call from someone I know who he and his friends have been meeting since the election and are talking about how they want to make a difference. And they've identified immigration as an area they want to work. And they're like, so what can we do? And it's like, well, I don't have an answer to that right now, but what can you do? What are the assets? What are the connections you have? And begin to think about that. For faith communities, I've also asked them to begin to having a conversation about sanctuary. What does that mean for you? You ought to look into it. You ought to talk about it. Don't wait for the moment where we really need to have churches doing some of that work. So begin exploring and doing the things internally. And I think our community will be very well positioned come later this summer, early fall, to begin having lots of new initiatives and opportunities to do stuff together.
I hope so. What I've found with volunteers over time is that you can beg them, practically beg them, tell me what you can do or what you want to do, and they're like, I don't know, why don't you tell me what you want me to do? And you're just like, I don't know what you know how to do. It's this weird, it's like the old, what do you want for dinner? Oh, I don't know, I don't care. Well, how about hamburgers? No. Well, what do you want? I don't care. Pizza. I don't. We had pizza last. You know, it's that kind of thing. It seems to be that it's a forever tug of war with people. Just like they really want you just to say, here's this thing.
Well, and I think we do have to do that. I mean, I do have to think. We have to think strategically. What are opportunities? We have to do it. We need the resources to build that all out. It's really one of the things is this stuff doesn't happen just because we want it to happen. And, and volunteers can do a lot, but it takes more than that. So I think here the goal is let's get people together who have some of the resources and the ability to have an impact and come up with good ideas and try them out. I think, you know, who never knows? It's always messy and sloppy and nothing goes as well as you want. But I always see progress in the various things, and it takes different forms than what we originally envisioned. But I am encouraged by what I've heard so far anyway.
Well, I think it's a wonderful idea. I mean, I think it's great because it's like you're filling a high-end niche. There's that word again. Niche or niche? Niche?
Niche sounds classier.
Niche. Anyway, it's kind of like there's room up here for this to happen. There's, as you said, there are a lot of groups down here on the ground who are doing things and who are like, okay, we're struggling along, making stuff happen. There's this big gap, this big space. I mean, we met with the mayor the other day talking about stuff, and it's just like, well, we're doing this, and it's like, okay, that's great, but there's this miles of space in between. So I can say, well, I wish you would do this, and they'd go, oh, we can't do that because structural blah, 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 and you're like, okay, I don't understand that, so I'm not really sure why, but apparently you can't do this thing that I want you to do, so I don't know what else, you know. There needs to be somebody in between who's kind of got a foot in both sides, the people down on the ground and up here in the rarefied heights who can kind of connect those things. And it seems like the Y is perfectly positioned in between those areas. And it sounds like what you're doing is
trying to get
consciously positioning yourself in this space. So it's like, okay, what are these people doing? What are these people doing? Let's link them together somehow. Yeah. And I think that's great. I should say we're right near the end of our hour. If there was something you wanted to say but didn't get a chance to, this is your opportunity to throw that in.
This may, at least for the next few weeks, people should know that April 8th is the Y's annual dinner, in which we'll be formally kicking this off, and we'll make an announcement before then. But if they would like to join us at the I Hotel on April 8th, they can go to our website, www.universityymca.org, and select our annual dinner, and they can get tickets and join us, and it'll be a great celebration. So.
Is that thing that I've done the last couple of years where you have speeches and there's that auction?
The auction stuff,
all that stuff, and an excellent dinner, by the way. It's always
very
pretty good.
Yes.
And people kind of wander around holding wine glasses and looking very classy.
That's true. It's free wine, I think, so there's a real incentive for if you like a glass of wine.
I'm always underdressed. I'm like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, who are you? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm just this dude.
But it's fun.
Yeah, no, it is.
And it's our big fundraiser, so it'll help support the work that we're doing.
So this is your big event of the year.
Yep.
Well, I should let people know here in this last couple of minutes that you've been listening to CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. Have to throw that in. We're here every Monday from 7 to 8 or thereabouts. And we like to talk about immigration and or related topics. Today's guest has been Mr. Michael Doyle, the director at the University YMCA, speaking about their welcoming New
American Welcome Center.
New American Welcome Center, that the Y is going to be involved with, which I think is a great thing. And I hope that it works out, and we will hear more about it as time goes by. I'm sure we'll be talking about it. In the meantime, I hate to rush off here, but you know how it goes. We'll talk to you again next week. See you later. Bye-bye.